The shopping bags dropped to the ground, and young Jin was stunned, unable to believe what he was seeing. A giant monster resembling a snake stood before him, its claws effortlessly crushing a building. The sight filled him with fear. The monster then turned to face him, causing young Jin to scream and run. However, he bumped into someone, a mysterious silhouette blocking his path. A black man stood there, staring without any reaction. He calmly stated that it was a dragon. At this, young Jin immediately woke up with a start, sitting up in bed and wondering if it had all been just a dream. He felt very cold and adjusted the temperature in the room. Young Jin then walked towards the pan in the kitchen, but upon looking inside, he realized it was practically empty. He then checked the rice bag and discovered it was also empty. Frustrated, he threw the rice bag into a trash bag to the side. He proceeded to the bathroom, turned on the tap, and began brushing his teeth. While brushing, he thought about needing to eat something later, outside of home. Later, protagonist, as he is referred to later, went upstairs and noticed a stray dog eating garbage. He watched the scene with disgust and then threw the garbage away. He looked at the dog again briefly. Then, he headed towards the convenience store. Upon arriving, he saw dog food and noticed it was quite expensive. Despite the cost, he decided to buy some, cutting back on his own expenses. He offered the dog some food, and the mutt accepted it. Young Jin then put his hand on the dog's head, praising him as a good boy and telling him not to eat garbage anymore. He then started walking towards school. On his way, he realized he was making a lot of noise, so he took out his earphones and put them in his ears. When he glanced at his cell phone, he saw numerous automatic messages from his operator, congratulating him on his birthday. He ignored these messages and continued towards school. Arriving at school, young Jin observed some students taking personality tests. He overheard some girls talking about tarot card readings, mentioning they were very expensive, around 10,000 won. Young Jin thought to himself that earning so much money in just one session explained why scammers continued to prey on people. He considered them idiots because if these readings were accurate, people born on the same day would have the same personality. He thought that even a little bit of reflection would reveal how strange that idea was. He heard a girl excitedly announcing that she was an ANP, while the SOP was someone who seemed to have a lot to say but chose to remain silent. Suddenly, young Jin received a slap, and the person said, "Happy birthday to us." Young Jin, surprised, asked what the hell that was about. The nerdy classmates started scattering a bunch of wrappers on the table, explaining they were birthday powders. Young Jin commented that it was a bit excessive. The nerd, bowing like a nerdy butler, presented something and said it was young Jin's birthday present, adding that since he didn't know young Jin's preferred flavor, he had prepared a variety. Young Jin asked if he was serious and if he was really giving him birthday bread. Ned, the nerd, asked why not, saying it was a congratulation with a little bread, emphasizing bread one and jokingly saying young Jin lacked a sense of humor. Young Jin then distributed the bread to the others, thinking that his breakfast problem was solved, and asked if there was anything to drink. Ned replied affirmatively and placed some apple juice on the table. Young Jin questioned if Ned had spent all his money on bread. One of the classmates commented that they should eat pork ribs after class. Another responded, suggesting that young Jin might have planned a family dinner or something similar. Young Jin remained silent for a moment and then asked who even goes out for a family dinner to celebrate a birthday these days. At that moment, a chubby guy arrived, wishing young Jin a happy birthday. He then warned young Jin to be careful because he had a dream where his teeth broke, which he claimed was a dream indicating that people around him would get hurt. Young Jin sarcastically asked if he was sleeping while grinding his teeth. But the chubby guy insisted he was serious, stating that his dreams usually came true. They then started making bets among themselves about whether young Jin would get hurt or not. The nerd bet that young Jin would get hurt and then punched him. The other one also placed a bet and elbowed young Jin. Then he ran off. Another nerd appeared with a broom in hand, betting that young Jin wouldn't get hurt. They continued their playful fighting. Young Jin left the room, thinking that they had a lot of money and were a bunch of bourgeois bastards. As he walked, he bumped into someone, causing letters she was carrying to fall to the ground. He apologized and decided to help her pick them up. She said it was okay because she hadn't been paying attention either. Jin asked what all that was about and handed her the deck of cards, saying he had caught everything that had scattered. She took the deck in her hand, and Jin found her demeanor strange. She seemed distant, and he thought it was weird, not understanding what was happening. She broke the silence and stated that he was celebrating his birthday today. Jin, slightly confused, confirmed that it was. She then took the deck, announced she would read his fortune, and instructed him to choose a card. Jin made a face of disdain, saying he didn't want to. She insisted he shouldn't be annoying and just choose one card. However, he thanked her and said he wasn't a big fan of these things. At that moment, the nerd appeared, saying he had found him and telling him to stay still so as not to get hurt. But then he corrected himself, saying he was sorry because he was going to get hurt quickly. Jin stood his ground, and the nerd ran after the girl. Jin then looked at the floor and noticed a letter that was left behind. He bent down to pick it up and realized it was a letter titled Death. Her friends then screamed for her, calling her name, Isu. She turned and left with her friends. Jin then returned to the classroom. Bored, he dozed off during class, only to be awakened by the teacher's scream. He asked his friend what page they were on, while the teacher scolded them, reminding them that they were still in the first semester and should not be losing focus. Jin then noticed a silhouette in the window, which startled him. He wondered what it was. The teacher, noticing Jin looking towards the window, asked him his name, mentioning that he had been looking at the hallway since the beginning of class and asking if he wanted the window opened. Jin said no, explaining that he thought he saw someone outside. However, when they looked, no one was there. Jin then thought he might have been mistaken. The students started whispering about the person next to Jin, calling him an old psychopath and crazy. After class, Jin opened the door and left the room. He started looking around the hallway, but couldn't find anyone. Suddenly, someone came up behind him and slapped him on the back, saying congratulations. Jin asked what his problem was. The bully replied, "It's me, you little shit," and Jin recognized him as Siru. The bully told him to fix his hair because he didn't want to be associated with him. Jin frowned, thinking to himself that he just had to pretend he didn't know him, internally calling Siru a little shit. Siru asked what was wrong with his face and said that he looked like he was calling him a piece of shit in his head, sarcastically calling him miserable Sherlock Holmes. He started to intimidate Jin, calling him trash, and grabbed his arm. Suddenly, a girl hugged Jin's arm and asked the bully who he was and what he was doing to her boyfriend, surprising both Jin and Siru. The bully asked Isu if Jin was really her boyfriend and if this was some kind of joke. Isu, whom Jin recognized as the girl from earlier, replied that it wasn't. Siru asked Isu if she was serious and said it was ridiculous. Isu retorted that the only ridiculous thing was his face. The bully, Shed, became angry and called her a little shit. Then he laughed, saying he couldn't do anything against a girl. After that, he put his hand on Jin's shoulder, apologizing sarcastically and commenting that Jin now had a girlfriend, implying it was because Isu was rich and completing his insult by calling Jin a poor orphan. He left, calling Jin an idiot and laughing. Isu then asked Jin if he was okay and what Siru had said to him. Jin let go of her arm and asked her what she was doing, saying that they didn't even know each other, so how could he be her boyfriend? He worried that if rumors spread, all the Sheds would come after Isu. He then surprised himself by thinking that in truth, he actually would like there to be rumors. Isu then asked Jin if he wanted to go out with her. Suspicious, Jin asked if it was some kind of punishment or something. Isu replied no, and that she actually liked him. Jin apologized and said he would have to refuse. He thought to himself that he was a Sigma and didn't have time for this. He then left. Isu gave him a strange look and started following him, whether he was in the classroom or leaving the bathroom. Even No Vittoria left gifts for him. The nerd, Ned, told Jin to tell the truth and asked if he was dating Isu. Jin answered no. Someone then interrupted them, calling for Jin and saying that his girlfriend was there. Isu appeared with a smile, calling out his name, leaving Jin wondering why this was suddenly happening. Ru Isu followed Young Jin down the hallway, calling his name several times. He finally turned and told her to stop before he got angry. Ru Isu asked what the problem was and told him to relax. Young Jin insisted no and repeated that he had told her to stop. He thought to himself that she was really crazy. Ru Isu laughed, saying the crazy ones are the good ones. She asked if he hated her and apologized, saying she would try harder. Young Jin said there was nothing to try because they didn't even know each other. Ru Isu excitedly said she loved him. Young Jin was stunned and then said she would do things her way. He then declared he wanted to break up with her and that from now on, they were strangers. He left, and Ru Isu put her hand to her face. Young Jin was walking home while talking to his friends on his cell phone. One of them asked if he was enjoying his love life, and another asked why he had kept it a secret. One friend told him to just admit it and that it would be cool to date Ru Isu. Her friends were also apparently watching Young Jin, being malicious and wanting to see him with Ru Isu's friends. Young Jin became irritated with the joke. He started typing that it wasn't true, but then remembered it wouldn't work, so he just gave up. He then noticed something: the dog he had found in the morning was still there. He looked at the dog for a moment, surprised that it was still there, but then just walked past and headed towards his house. Looking outside, he noticed the weather was cloudy. He went inside his house and started changing his clothes. He looked depressed and lonely. Then raindrops began to fall, and as he looked outside, he realized the rain was getting heavier. The scene changed to Young Jin drying the dog. The dog then started shaking itself to dry, getting Young Jin wet in the process. Young Jin ran out and climbed into bed. He asked the dog if this was now his house as well and smiled, seeing that the dog seemed comfortable. He put some food in a bowl for the dog and thought that seeing him like this, it seemed like the owner had either forgotten him there, abandoned him, or maybe he had never had an owner. The dog then walked towards Young Jin and climbed onto his lap. Seeing the dog being so docile, Young Jin no longer felt so alone. Young Jin then felt the dog place a paw on his chest, followed by another. The dog started scratching, and Young Jin, confused, asked what was wrong. He got up, commenting that today had been full of surprises, and remarked that the dog itself was another surprise. He suddenly felt uneasy, as if sensing something in the window. He looked towards the window, but saw nothing. Just then, there was a knock at his door, causing the dog to bark. Young Jin told the dog to be quiet and wondered who could be at his door at this hour, thinking that no one should be coming. He cautiously looked through the peephole but couldn't see anyone. Then, a voice said, "John, it's me," startling him. He asked, "Who are you?" The person repeated, "It's me again." He asked again, "Who are you?" and the voice replied, "Who am I?" Ru Isu. Young Jin was shocked and opened the door. He saw Ru Isu standing there, completely soaked from the rain. He asked how she had gotten there, and she replied that this was the concept of a girlfriend returning after being rejected by her boyfriend. Young Jin, bewildered, asked what she was talking about, but then noticed how wet her clothes were. He quickly closed the door and told her to wait a minute. He opened it again, throwing a towel over her and handing her an umbrella, telling her to use it. He thought to himself that he was being quite chivalrous. Ru Isu took the umbrella. He then told her to share it because it was very cold and threw his coat at her, telling her to wear it. Young Jin, still confused, asked how she knew where he lived. She responded by asking how she would know, and simply stated that she had followed him. He was surprised and asked if she was crazy, leaving her momentarily shocked. He added, asking why she had followed him all the way to his house and why she was doing this to him. He told her to stop acting weird and to just say what she wanted. Ru Isu asked if he meant that if she said what she wanted, he would give it to her. He clarified that he would just listen. She then replied that she wanted it, a psychotic look appearing on her face. Young Jin was speechless and asked if she was serious, telling her to go home and wondering if it seemed so easy for her to come to his house. As she turned to leave, she turned back and asked if he wanted money. Young Jin turned around angrily. Ru Isu then said she would pay 100,000 won for him to go out with her, and increased the offer to 400,000 won. Young Jin scoffed, saying to stop with the unfunny joke and asking how a student would have so much money. Ru Isu then confidently said, "I have it," and showed him her bank account balance, displaying 11 million won, which she mentioned was equivalent to 46,000 in another currency. Young Jin was stunned, wondering if this was serious, and recalled the bully saying she was rich. He told her she was very crazy and that she must have been watching too many movies, and asked if her parents knew about this. She replied that he hadn't told them yet. The scene shifted to Young Jin's cell phone, which had just received a transfer of 100,000 won from Ru Isu. Young Jin wondered if he had gone crazy. Ru Isu, appearing happy, declared that it was decided then. He wondered if he seemed very cheap to her, but then thought, 100,000 won per hour. He considered what his friends would think and if they would ask if he was selling his body for money. He internally said, "Job, Young Jin, pro," reminding himself of his situation. Ru Isu said they would do this until the bus arrived and told him to pretend they didn't know each other at school. She asked why and if he was worried about gossip. She said he could do it even without money and then told Young Jin that she knew he had no parents, stating it was a secret he hid from his friends. She reached out and said that he had to treat her well. Young Jin looked at her in astonishment. She smiled and asked what he was doing, saying her hands were cold. Young Jin hesitantly took one of his hands off the umbrella, made a fist, and told her to get out, saying he would send the money back and that she was crazy for a second. He told her to use the umbrella and that she could say whatever she wanted at school. Ru Isu started talking about how he hated girls and money, and said that pretending was so expensive, concluding by saying that he was a boy who would die soon. Young Jin, not understanding, asked what. She replied that he would die today and then took a card out of her pocket, saying that her tarot cards were never wrong and that he would die today. He told her to control herself, but she suddenly screamed out of nowhere, saying that he needed to control himself, and that it was so frustrating because all he had was this empty body and yet he was so proud. Young Jin wondered why she was acting like this. She threw the card in his face and asked why he couldn't understand what she was saying. He got angry and said that she was very crazy. Ru Isu, with a scary expression, repeated that he had a body that would die today and told him to give it to her. She then grabbed Young Jin's hand and pulled him. The umbrella fell to the ground, and Young Jin found himself kneeling while she held his arm. He asked what she was doing and felt his arm being crushed in several places. He was terrified by the sensation, as if multiple hands were holding his arm. Then Ru Isu called his name, and he raised his face to look at her, encountering her terrifying visage. She then asked if her hands were cold. Young Jin was completely stunned, in disbelief at what was happening. She repeated that it was because he hadn't held them fast enough. He started to wonder what this was, a mascot costume, special makeup? Then he noticed something, apparently, it was real. Ru Isu then said she would ask one more time and asked if he could give his body to her, ordering him to answer yes or no. Terrified, Young Jin couldn't even speak. The demon said she would give him 3 seconds and started counting, 1, 2, 3. Then she lunged at Young Jin, who quickly began to run. A relentless chase began. "Oh, those little legs of Ru Isu," Young Jin thought as he ran, questioning what kind of dream this was. The demon shouted Young Jin's name and then punched at him, but missed and hit the ground. The impact, however, made debris fly up, and the demon caught a piece of it in the air, laughing and saying that she had caught him. But then the demon slipped and ended up letting go of the debris and of Young Jin. Young Jin felt pain, but didn't waste time and immediately got up again. The demon began to recover and was already behind him again. He concluded that this was not a dream and that if he was caught, he would be killed. He saw an alley and immediately ran into it, panting and completely exhausted. He looked back to see if he was being chased and thought that this alley was narrow and she probably wouldn't be able to get through there. He sat down on the floor to rest, however, the demon's voice echoed, asking if he really thought she wouldn't be able to get through. Young Jin looked up, realizing she was there, and stood completely still, frozen in fear and despair. Ru Isu said it was disappointing because the alley was very thin, and where was she? He tried to get up again, but his legs wouldn't move. The demon then put her hand on his face, speaking of poor young Jin, saying he lived in such a dirty basement, without a father or mother, hiding it from his friends because he was embarrassed. She called him miserable and asked why he was still living. Young Jin started begging for someone to help him, but there was no one there. The only sound was the rain. The demon told Young Jin to look around, saying there was no one to come and help him and telling him to just give up. She said he didn't need to fight to live, he just needed to answer, and she would let him live. However, Young Jin somehow broke free and started running again. The demon became furious and asked why he was resisting, since she had said she wouldn't kill him. She claimed she only wanted his body and that she would make it easier for him, just like she had. Young Jin continued running. As the demon tried to catch him, she ripped off Young Jin's arm, leaving him astonished. The demon then stopped, looked at her hands, and said that she had told him to come and regretted having ruined everything, ruining his precious body. The demon became enraged, blaming Young Jin for what had happened and saying it was so disappointing. Young Jin couldn't believe what had happened, wondering if this was real and if he would die like this. However, he started to reflect, questioning if he really had what it took to live. If living was going to be like this, maybe it was better to die. He then remembered what his friend had said about people around him getting hurt, realizing that these dreams were not mere superstitions. The demon approached Young Jin, calling his name and saying that if she couldn't have him, then she would destroy him. She opened her mouth wide, intending to devour Young Jin, who was lying on the ground. However, footsteps began to be heard in the rain, apparently, they were the dogs. The dog went up to the demon to defend Young Jin. The demon's face split in half, and then her entire body broke apart. It seemed the demon had been cut by a mysterious person. Young Jin, almost fading out of consciousness, could see shadows of that person, but had no idea who was defending him. The person started talking about what day it was and then wished Young Jin a happy birthday. The scene cut to a mysterious silhouette wishing him a happy birthday and then calling him my descendant, reaching out towards him. Young Jin regained consciousness, exhausted and completely soaked in sweat. He put his hand on his face, noting how hot he was, and realized he was very sweaty. He started looking for his cell phone and found it. His friends were messaging him, asking where he was, and even his teacher had called him. He panicked when he saw the time, thinking he was screwed, and wondered when he had fallen asleep yesterday. Saying this, he was stunned and remembered what had happened the previous day. Looking at his arm, he realized it was there. He moved his hand and concluded that he was alive. He then asked himself what the hell had happened and if that was all real. He was then startled by a call from his teacher. The scene shifted to school. Young Jin ran through the gate and, arriving completely tired, wondered if Ru Isu would come to school today. He decided to go to the classroom. He entered cautiously and overheard Ru Isu's friends talking. One with curly hair asked why Ru Isu was acting that way. Another said she had no idea. The one with brown hair said she wanted Ru Isu to read her fortune today. Overhearing this, Young Jin murmured that he found it annoying. He then started searching the room and finally found Ru Isu. She was acting strangely, and he was surprised because she seemed fine. He wondered if he should ask her about yesterday. His friends then arrived and called him a delinquent for being late, asking why he had ignored their messages. Young Jin tried to deny it, but his friend said he had worried for nothing because the first thing Young Jin had done when he arrived was look for his girlfriend. Young Jin insisted it wasn't like that and that yesterday he was there, but before he could finish, he exchanged glances with Ru Isu. His friend said that instead of going home, he had gone to meet his girlfriend. His friends didn't understand anything because Young Jin had been hiding his interactions with Ru Isu, so they asked what he was doing and if he had gotten excited. When the two exchanged looks, they realized something and started to make fun of him. Young Jin left the classroom, crawling, and his friends said that this was pathetic. After that, back in the classroom, Young Jin reflected. He didn't remember being killed, but he couldn't recall what had happened next or how he had gotten home. He wondered what it had all been about. If it were a dream, it would make more sense. Looking at the money transfer he had received yesterday, he wondered if he should ask Ru Isu about it. However, he decided it was better not to, as his arm looked normal and there seemed to be nothing wrong. After class, Young Jin was talking to his teacher. She asked if there was anything wrong, and Young Jin replied that there wasn't, he had just slept too much. The teacher asked if he had eaten anything at least. He said yes, and she concluded that there was nothing wrong. The bell rang, and Young Jin left the teacher's room. Looking at his cell phone, he thought about how he hadn't even paid attention in class today. He left school, and outside, Ru Isu appeared. Seeing her, Young Jin was startled. She apologized, saying she hadn't meant to scare him. She said she had heard that he had gone to the teacher's room, so she had decided to wait for him. Young Jin said that the bell had already rung and asked if following him was her hobby and if she couldn't act normally. Ru Isu apologized, saying she hadn't meant to bother him. She then brought up yesterday's subject, and Young Jin got scared, thinking that there was no one around. He said that they should talk in a place with more people, not because he was scared, but because she might attack him at any moment. She started to say no and that at that time, she had been possessed by a ghost. Young Jin didn't believe it, and she said it was a long story. Then he noticed something. Ru Isu said that first, she apologized for hurting him dearly and that she was very, very sorry. Young Jin then interrupted her and asked why that was there. He was referring to a statue at the main gate that hadn't been there before. The statue then came to life and began to advance towards them. They were in shock, and Ru Isu told Young Jin to run. A relentless chase began. Young Jin asked what she had done this time, and Ru Isu insisted she hadn't done anything. Young Jin questioned Ru Isu, saying, how could she not? He pointed out that she had done the same thing to him yesterday. Ru Isu insisted she could explain everything, mumbling that it wasn't her and that there was a ghost involved, named Sask. Young Jin told her to shut up and run, realizing the statue was fast and would catch them. He spotted a basketball cart and started pushing it, knocking the balls towards the statue. However, things didn't go as planned. The statue cleverly jumped over the balls, surprising Young Jin. Upon landing, the statue struck a pose. Young Jin then suggested they find more people. Ru Isu began searching for something in her jacket. She pulled out a bag of beans and threw them towards the statue. The statue, noticing the beans, deflected them back, hitting Ru Isu in the face. Young Jin, exasperated, thought to himself, what are you doing, you idiot? He then saw something. The gate was open. He ran through it with Ru Isu and closed it, finally feeling safe. Both were exhausted, and the statue stood in front of them, staring. Young Jin and Ru Isu panted, hoping the statue would give up. The statue appeared to back off, and they wondered if it had finally given up. Young Jin let out a sigh of relief, but Ru Isu noticed something. A flag was moving. She warned Young Jin, and the statue came running towards them, wielding the flagpole. Young Jin yelled she is crazy. Young Jin exclaimed that the statue was going to jump and asked if Ru Isu was crazy. He frantically searched for something and found another cart. The statue planted the pole on the ground and performed an Olympic-like leap over the gate, aiming to land on top of Ru Isu. However, Young Jin called out to her, telling her to move, while pushing the cart. Ru Isu started crying and fell onto the cart, which was filled with garbage. The stench was overwhelming, causing them to cover their faces. Seeing them distracted, they decided to escape. However, something happened. The statue rushed towards them, grabbed Young Jin by the neck, and lifted him into the air. Ru Isu desperately screamed his name. The monster had a serious expression, and Young Jin was in immense pain. Scared, Ru Isu screamed for it to stop. As Young Jin was almost out of breath, Ru Isu again searched for something in her jacket and pulled out a Buddhist bracelet. She drew the statue's attention and threw the bracelet at it. Upon impact, an explosion occurred. The statue began to writhe in pain, and Young Jin fell to the ground. Ru Isu rushed to help him, asking if he was okay. He replied that he wasn't. Before the monster could recover, they quickly fled. In a different location, someone was trying to use a lighter. Young Jin said that if she had that, she should have used it earlier. He stared at the smoke rising and asked if she was smoking. Ru Isu replied that she wasn't, and that it was incense. Young Jin asked what she was doing, and she explained it was a simple ritual. She then started to pull something from her shorts, ripped them, and tied a piece of fabric around Young Jin's wrist. She said it would protect him for now and that he shouldn't remove it until midnight. Young Jin looked at his wrist with a disgusted expression, then called her weird, asking if she knew it. He remarked sarcastically about her innocence. Ru Isu was surprised and said she knew it might seem like that, but she hadn't done anything. She asked if they could talk after school. Young Jin responded that it was out of the question. He sighed and began to question her. He said that, hypothetically, she might have been possessed by a ghost yesterday, and today might be just a coincidence. But the fact remained that ever since he got involved with her, strange things had started happening to him. She insisted it wasn't because of her. He thanked her for saving him but said that none of this would have happened if she hadn't been there. He proposed that they stop pretending to know each other and then turned and left, leaving Ru Isu with her head bowed. Later, Young Jin arrived home. He started typing in the password, and as he did, he noticed the cloth Ru Isu had tied around his wrist. He remembered her saying not to remove it until midnight. However, he began to untie it, wondering what she was planning now, and then threw it in the trash. Entering the house, he turned on the light and was startled by the dog almost falling. Then he remembered and asked the dog if he had been there all along. They stared at each other, and Young Jin concluded that the dog must be hungry. He put some snacks on a plate, but the dog just stood there, staring at the food. After a while, Young Jin lay down and went to use his cell phone. Then, a voice said it again, but Young Jin ignored it. The voice spoke again, saying, "Bring me real food." Young Jin was confused, unsure where the sound was coming from. The voice continued, "I'm very hungry, so I'll eat this for now. Next time, set the table properly." Young Jin got up, and the voice asked what he was doing. As Young Jin searched, he wondered where the voice was coming from. The mysterious person then said, "Ah, you can finally hear me." Young Jin started looking for the dog, calling out, "Here, here." The dog stared at him wordlessly, in disbelief. Young Jin began examining the dog, looking for a hidden speaker. The dog, annoyed, asked what he was doing. Young Jin, astonished, wondered if the dog was really talking, thinking he might be going crazy or even developing schizophrenia. The dog told him not to deny reality and acknowledged that its appearance might seem like madness. The drawer then started to rattle, and something fell on Young Jin's head. He threw it, asking what it was, and upon looking, realized it was a blood-covered blouse. Young Jin screamed and threw it away, completely terrified. The dog, staring at him, asked if he remembered what had happened yesterday. A whirlwind of memories began to flash through Young Jin's mind. He then put his hand on his arm. Scared, Young Jin asked, "What are you?" The dog, in turn, asked Young Jin, "What are you?" It questioned how he was walking and talking and asked if this was the first time it had happened. Young Jin didn't understand anything and questioned how the dog could even ask him that. The dog then told Young Jin to call someone besides him. Young Jin asked, "How come, someone?" The dog clarified, "The one who raised you. You need to understand about your family." Young Jin responded that he had no one. The dog was surprised, asking if he meant his family was gone. Young Jin got up and asked why the dog was suddenly talking about this. The dog kept asking if there were other members of his family, but Young Jin simply replied that he didn't know. The dog called him a mongrel and thought that Young Jin had survived thanks to his own power, and that it didn't seem like he was in the wrong place. The dog wondered what had happened while he was away. He then asked if Young Jin wasn't going to thank him for saving him yesterday. Young Jin replied, "You're a monster." The dog laughed and asked, "Monster? How can you say that? I am your ancestor." Young Jin, incredulous, asked, "My ancestor? A dog is my ancestor?" Young Jin retorted to the dog, "So actually I'm a dog?" The dog replied, "You imbecile, I'm not a dog." But Young Jin countered that he had already looked in the mirror. The ancestor then began to explain that it wasn't this dog that was speaking, but that Young Jin could hear his voice. Young Jin questioned why the dog's mouth was moving. The dog answered that it was because he was in this body now. Young Jin responded, "Then you are a dog." De Guinho tried to explain himself, saying that he was not a dog. Young Jin, sarcastically, said that if he wasn't a dog, he must be an ancestral ghost, making the dog furious. Our boy then asked what the ancestral ritual, Buddha statue wanted from him. He said he didn't have money for it and if it needed help, it should look for another descendant. The dog became unresponsive and started walking back and forth by the bed. Protagonist stared at him, then casually said, "By the way, there's the bathroom." The dog stopped and asked if his family no longer served. Our boy questioned which family, saying there was no family left. Upon hearing that, the dog declared, "So it's decided," and turning to Young Jin, said, "From now on, you will help me." Young Jin asked if he was going to stay there, and the dog replied, "Where else would I go?" Young Jin became angry and started pushing the dog, saying, "Ancestor or not, get out of here." The dog, on the floor, said, "Even after I saved your life, you bastard." Young Jin said he appreciated it but pleaded with him to leave because he was just a student who had no money. He jokingly said he was researching symptoms of schizophrenia and concluded that he couldn't take care of an ancestor. The dog got angry, but then noticed something in the window, so he jumped, scaring Young Jin. Young Jin asked what he was doing with his trash and why he was barking now. The ancestor then spoke, "There is something out there," confusing Young Jin. The dog kept asking what Young Jin had brought there. Protagonist asked what he meant, and the ancestor jumped onto his head, saying, "Let's go." Young Jin, confused, asked where, and the dog angrily answered, "Outside." Our boy asked why, and the ancestor replied that he was here, in front. "Don't move." Without believing him, Young Jin told him to stop it and, taking him off his head, said, "Stop it, get out." However, he then heard something that astonished him and paralyzed him. It seemed the dog was not lying. Seeing this, the ancestor started to pull him, telling him to get up and go outside. As they started to leave, the dog, turning his face, said, "Over here." Young Jin finally saw it. It was the statue again. Young Jin asked why it was there, leaving the dog surprised that he recognized it. Our boy began to explain that it was his school statue and that suddenly it had turned into a monster. The dog countered, saying that it was not a monster but a spirit. Protagonist then questioned if spirits looked like that. The dog called him an idiot and began explaining that spirits were entities that arose when a soul inhabited an inanimate object, and their forms varied. He said there were countless spirits on Earth and to think of them as part of nature. The statue then put its hand through the window and finally revealed itself. When Young Jin saw the statue's gaze, he questioned whether it was really part of nature. The dog then questioned why it was so angry because spirits were naturally kind and difficult to irritate. Young Jin remembered that he had pushed a garbage cart to make the statue fall and said that it had attacked him first. The statue then punched the window, breaking shards of glass towards protagonist. After that, the statue was in the room. Young Jin was stunned after seeing that destruction. The dog then interrupted, asking what he was doing and ordering him to leave quickly. The statue, recovering, cast a frightening look at him, leaving him on alert. The ancestor then came in front and told him to go quickly. Our worried boy asked what he was going to do, however, the dog ignored him and ordered him to go quickly. Young Jin quickly started running and took one last look at the dog, remembering that he had said he was his ancestor. The dog then started to stare at the statue and then began to speak, "Hey bastard, are you kidding me? Do you know who I am?" The dog was emitting a scary aura as he opened its mouth. However, in reality, it was just a cute small dog. The statue then slapped him, throwing him away. "Get away from that, man, don't hit the dog, you're not crazy," Young Jin yelled. The dog hit the wall and fell to the floor. Young Jin also started running from the statue. The statue then asked what had happened and why he was running away. The dog then asked if Young Jin was still there, and our boy said that it hadn't even been 10 seconds since he told him to run and asked if yesterday the dog had really saved him. The ancestor kind of awkwardly said yes. Protagonist then asked what he could do, and the dog just told him to shut up and called him a brat. Young Jin then called him a borrowable can of worms, and the angry ancestor asked if he was joking now. In the meantime, the statue caught up to Young Jin. The protagonist thought he was caught again, but his jacket started to come off, and he fell face down on the ground. The statue looked at the jacket and then started to put it on. The ancestor told him to get up quickly. While putting on the jacket, the statue gave a smug smile. Young Jin already knew something bad was going to happen, so the statue got into a running position, and desperately, the dog himself started running. The statue then advanced towards them, but a strange sound began to be heard, repelling the statue. Ru Isu had put on a speaker, leaving protagonist and the dog surprised. Apparently, it was Ru Isu using a JBL speaker, breathing hopelessly. Zhang Jin was surprised to see Ru Isu there. Apparently she had put 8 hours of monks chanting, and this sound was making the statue catch fire. Yang Jin asked what was going on. Then he realized something and regretted it because his jacket was on fire. The guy was worried about the jacket. Ru Isu was nervous, and Yang Jin was perplexed. The ancestor asked if she had done it. However, something happened. The statue began to support itself and, little by little, began to recover. The spirit had a furious look, leaving Ru Isu scared and trembling, and she began to retreat. However, the statue moved towards her, but someone began to move. Yang Jin got in front of her and took a punch. With a loud impact, they both fell to the ground, and Yang Jin started to feel a lot of pain in his ribs. Ru Isu then got worried about something. The spirit was going to step on the JBL speaker. It stepped on it, which opened a crater in the ground. The statue was furious. She then began to pick up debris on the ground and prepared to throw it, surprising Ru Isu and Yang Jin. She threw the debris towards them, and stones started to hit them. One of them hit Ru Isu's back, and another hit Yang Jin's arms, and a lot of debris started hitting them. After that, an explosion happened, and after all the smoke passed, the two were on the ground, completely crushed. The statue then started walking towards them, surprising our boy. However, he heard something. He looked back and asked what Ru Isu was doing, and then, without strength, she said that he had to run away. Raizu urged Yang Jin to run away, but he tried to question her. He was then shocked to see the spirit statue carrying a car. They were right in front of Newtown Street, and Raizu was desperately trying to light incense. Yang Jin, instinctively, moved and remembered his ancestor's instruction to leave. As he ran towards the street, he mentally pleaded with his ancestor for help, shouting his name. He then put his body in front of Raizu, realizing he was likely going to die that day. Instead of death, Yang Jin found himself in a strange place. He was confused, wondering if he had died and where everyone was. He called out for Raizu. The ancestor then appeared, now as a mysterious human figure, remarking that Yang Jin looked desperate. Yang Jin was surprised and called out ancestor, but was taken aback by the man in front of him. He stared at the man, unresponsive, and then asked, "Who are you?" The mysterious man asked if Yang Jin didn't recognize his ancestral voice. Yang Jin then pictured the dog's face on the man and hesitantly said, "Ancestor?" The man confirmed, "Yes, it's me, your ancestor." He then appeared behind Yang Jin and placed a hand on his arm, explaining that in the beginning, there were 12 gods, and he was one of them, the dragon god, ruler of dragons. Yang Jin's hand began to glow, and the ancestor declared, "He is Jin." Something started to emanate from Yang Jin's hand as the ancestor stated he would lend him his power. Suddenly, Yang Jin was back in reality. Raizu was surprised, while Yang Jin had a determined look. He attacked the statue, cutting the car it was holding in half. The car split into two, surprising the statue with the force of the impact. Yang Jin fell to the ground, collapsing to his knees. Raizu, worried, rushed to him. She wondered what had happened and how the car had been sliced in two. Yang Jin asked his ancestor what was going on. The ancestor urged him to get up before the statue caught him. Yang Jin tried to stand, carrying the sword that had appeared in his hand. He found it heavy. He became scared as the statue advanced, hitting him with a car trunk. Yang Jin was thrown against a wall, remaining there motionless. The dog ancestor jumped onto the statue's face and shouted, "Now, quickly!" Yang Jin started to run. The ancestor called him a coward for running, but Yang Jin retorted, "Turn around, spirit." The statue pulled the dog off its face and began chasing Yang Jin. Noticing the statue close behind, the ancestor shouted to use the sword. Young Jin turned, determined, and gripped the sword handle firmly. He swung the sword horizontally, but missed the statue. His eyes were closed, and he seemed to be swinging blindly. The ancestor yelled at him to hold on tight as Young Jin swung the sword wildly, not knowing what he was doing. The sword slipped from his grasp, and Young Jin realized he had messed up. He was flung away, spinning, and landed in a random location. He started to run again as the statue relentlessly pursued him. The statue, while running, noticed a feeling. The sensation of running as leaves fell triggered a memory. He began to remember why he was created. He recalled being a runner on a wall display during his manufacture, a tribute to the best athlete and the pride of Korea. He remembered people taking pictures with him, including the gentleman he was meant to honor. He lamented being moved from his original place and ending up in a school. He remembered all of this, and then he saw Young Jin running ahead. The statue suddenly fell to the ground, realizing something had gone wrong. He instinctively put his hands over his head, expecting impact, but Young Jin ran right past him, completely surprised. The statue, now lost in his memories, thought he was back at the event, excited as if crossing a finish line. He remembered the feeling of winning a medal, people cheering, autograph sessions, and children taking pictures with him. He was in complete ecstasy. Young Jin and Raizu watched, bewildered by the statue's sudden change in behavior, and then it simply disappeared. The ancestor, observing this, said, "It seems he achieved his dream and is now resting." Young Jin, confused, asked how so? The ancestor explained, "I already said that spirits are not dangerous as long as you follow their rules." Young Jin, curious, asked what the rules were. The dog replied, "It depends on the purpose they were created for." That's why I asked why he was angry. It's most likely because of something you did wrong. Young Jin and Raizu exchanged guilty looks. Young Jin then asked the dog sarcastically, "Are you kidding me, you fleabag?" The scene shifted to Young Jin in pain, saying his rib felt broken. The ancestor told him not to worry and changed the subject, asking if Raizu was okay. Raizu, still slightly scared, bowed in gratitude. The scene then cut to show everything that was broken regenerating, the crater in the ground, the split car, the condominium door, and even tree leaves. It was nighttime, and mysterious little creatures were repairing all the damage. Young Jin was completely bewildered. Raizu raised her head and asked, "You are John's ancestor, right?" The ancestor was surprised she could see him and asked if she was a shaman. She replied she wasn't, but that she was the daughter of a dog. She then corrected herself, saying that the last time he saved her, she had fainted. She imagined a scene in her head that hadn't actually happened and then said, "I wasn't able to thank you properly, so thank you very much." Young Jin then asked if she could hear the mutt, and she said yes, relieving him that he wasn't hallucinating. The dog ancestor asked Raizu, "How do you know I am an ancestor?" She responded, "It's what you two look like." Young Jin realized she was acting strangely and asked what was wrong. She blushed and said, "Young Jin, don't you see?" He asked, "See what?" She blushed more and said, "The appearance of your ancestor." She paused, seemingly flustered. The ancestor then interjected, "About my beauty, it is incomparable, and women get shy around me." Young Jin laughed sarcastically. Raizu then took out her phone and showed Young Jin a mirror app. She said that Raizu really looked very beautiful and that she was planning something, telling Young Jin to look at it. She put a bunny effect on Young Jin's face using the app, but mysteriously, the effect glitched, scaring Young Jin. He asked, "What the hell is this?" She said it must be a bug and started trying other effects, asking the ancestor to stay close to Young Jin. She started to run her hand over the phone screen to see if there was a problem. Then, everything went dark. Young Jin realized it was late and asked Raizu if she wasn't leaving. She seemed a little surprised by the question and then looked downcast. Raizu said she couldn't leave. Young Jin, completely tired, asked why. She explained that her mother was currently possessed by a powerful demon capable of summoning a sonax. A sonax, she clarified, was a vengeful spirit in Korean culture, usually someone who had died tragically or unfairly. Raizu feared that if she went home, her mother would possess her again and then come after Young Jin, just as the Sonax had done. Young Jin, confused, asked, "Why me?" Raizu explained it was because of his body. When he pressed her to elaborate on what was in his body, Raizu stated that his body was a valuable vessel, leaving Young Jin surprised. She stood up and took a bowl. "Filling it with water," she said, "in short, if this is a normal person," and then threw the water away. With the empty bowl, she continued, "That would be you." She explained that many demons would try to enter this empty container in the future. She admitted she didn't know how to tell him, but there was no other way to say what the demons wanted from him. Young Jin was perplexed. The ancestor, who was present, asked Young Jin if he didn't realize that all of this was happening because of him. Young Jin began to remember all the times he had blamed Raizu, asking what she had done to cause these events and how everything started after he got involved with her. He started to feel very guilty. The ancestor continued, mentioning that nothing would have happened before Young Jin's birthday. Raizu, hearing this, fell silent and walked towards the dog ancestor. Raizu knelt down and pleaded, "Ancestor, please help me." The ancestor asked, "Your mother was a shaman, you said? Did she serve and worship demons as gods?" Raizu was surprised and answered that her mother hadn't known about it. She began to explain, "My mother was a famous fortune teller, but she was also a person who prayed a lot every day. One day, she came back saying she had received a Holy Spirit. After that, our sanctuary, which had few visitors before, became recognized for fortune telling so accurate that it was booked a year in advance. However, in my eyes, it wasn't a god." Raizu continued, recounting how she had questioned her mother, "Mother, is the spirit you pray to really a god?" Her mother had slapped her and asked, "Are you doubting a god?" Raizu then finished her thought, saying, "That was a demon." She concluded by saying that ever since then, she had been trying to get rid of the demon attached to her mother, but she had failed. In the end, the demon had summoned the Sonax. The ancestor stated that the Sonax was a spirit of a shaman, explaining why common methods wouldn't work. He finished by saying he would help her because she had been brave in trying to protect Young Jin, even at the risk of her own life. He turned to Young Jin and asked, "Let's help her, right, Young Jin?" The astonished Young Jin simply said, "Huh?" Raizu quickly bowed, deeply grateful. As it was late, they decided to sleep. Young Jin called out to Raizu, asking what she was doing. She replied she was going to sleep, looking sadly at the toilet paper she was using as a makeshift bed on the floor. Young Jin asked if she was really going to sleep there. She explained she couldn't go home. Young Jin then asked if she didn't have any friends. She said she had no friends. When Young Jin mentioned the girl who was interested in fortune-telling, Raizu clarified that girl was the Sonax's friend, not hers. Young Jin suggested she pretend to be friendly with that girl. Raizu said she couldn't be like that because she was an introvert. She then started to say, "Young Jin, me dash," but before she could finish, Young Jin said no. She continued, "Listen to me until the end." Young Jin asked what it was. Excitedly, Raizu asked, "Can I sleep at your house?" He quickly refused, saying no. Raizu tried to convince him, swearing that she would only sleep. Young Jin was embarrassed and asked, "What? What do you mean? Are you thinking the wrong thing, you naughty boy?" Young Jin then said, "Just sleep like this. What's wrong with that, right?" The ancestor, stretching, commented, "This is called quoting," and suggested Young Jin could leave them alone if he wanted. Young Jin shouted, "What are you saying, you mangy dash?" He was interrupted by Raizu, who said, "Young Jin, I'm sorry, but can you lend me some clothes? Old clothes are fine." Young Jin was completely shocked. It was now night. Raizu was lying down, her expression anguished. In a dream sequence, her mother was making cuts on her finger, and blood dripped onto the floor. Raizu, in the dream, cried out, "Mom, I was wrong, sorry." Her mother slowly left the room as Raizu desperately called for her. The door closed with a noise. Raizu shouted, "Mom, I'm sorry. Let me out of here," while banging on the door. She became completely exhausted and breathless, whispering, "I'm scared." In her despair, she noticed something in front of her. It was the Sonax, saying, "Hello." The Sonax then asked, "Can I come in, right?" The ancestor realized something. Raizu was in tears while sleeping. Her expression gradually began to normalize as soon as the dog ancestor lay down next to her. The scene then shifted to a strange place with strange paintings on the wall. A woman, completely furious with a dark expression, slammed her fist on a table and said, "Raizu, you bitch. Where are you? When you come back, I'm going to lock you in a cage." It was apparent that Raizu's mother was surrounded by strange creatures. Dawn broke. Yongjin was sleeping. He slowly opened his eyes and checked the time. He got up to go to the bathroom, opening the door and yawning. He then realized Raizu was there, collapsed on the floor. He quickly closed the door. Raizu then said, "Good morning, Yongjin." The ancestor arrived and said, "The day started well, don't you think?" Later, Yongjin was getting ready to take out the trash. Raizu asked where he was going. He replied that there was no food in the fridge, and the dog ancestor was complaining about the coffee. He finished by saying she was the visitor. Excited, Raizu said, "So, you are going shopping? I can go with you." Yongjin apathetically answered, "You know." Yongjin took out the trash. Raizu remarked, "Yongjin, you are really an adult." He said, "Actually." And looked down. He then glanced at her from the corner of his eye. She was beaming, saying, "The weather is good." He remembered telling her that none of this would have happened if she hadn't been there, and how guilty she had looked. They were walking next to each other. Then Yongjin stopped and said, "Hey, Raizu." She asked, "What?" He mumbled, "You know." She stood there, not understanding. He felt guilty. He bent down and put his hand on her head. After that, he said, "I'm sorry." She asked, in doubt, "What for?" He responded, "You know, all that stuff, like none of this would have happened without you here, it was all because of me, I feel." She remained unresponsive. He continued, shyly, "Thank you very much. And even though it's none of your business." Raizu then approached him and said, "Yongjin, are you really an adult?" Seeing her approach, he was surprised. He asked if that bothered her. With a smile, she said it did, but it was okay. Even though it wasn't his intention, he had made things seem more difficult. And besides, she added, he will help her, even though that's not his problem. Then she said, "They are kits." Yongjin responded, saying he would give his best, while thinking that it was his ancestor who was helping her, not him. They arrived at the supermarket. Yongjin asked, "Why are you buying this?" pointing to something. Raizu said it was for him to eat when his blood sugar was low. Yongjin asked, "Die of diabetes?" Raizu then asked if he needed anything else. Yongjin wondered if there was a war coming, looking at the amount of food she was putting in the cart. He then said he couldn't buy all of that because he didn't have much money. Raizu replied, "So what? She will pay for everything and he doesn't have to worry. He can take whatever he needs." Yongjin was still hesitant and asked why she was buying all of this. She simply answered, "Oh, because I'm rich. Check out Mom's black card. It's one of those." She implied she had plenty of money to spend. Yongjin wanted to respond that even so, it was a lot, but she cut him off, saying, "Oh, I can pay for the exorcism." The scene cut to them leaving the supermarket. Yongjin thought to himself that this was the first time he had bought so much food. Raizu asked if Yongjin knew how to cook. He said no, and that it could turn out badly. She replied that not even she could mess up so much food. Yongjin then realized something, his friend was there. His friend looked to the side and finally recognized him. He then exclaimed, "Is that Ku Yongjin's girlfriend?" She greeted them. The scene then cut abruptly, showing Yongjin panting. He wondered why his friend, Lin, was here. He then realized Raizu was not there and thought she would come alone. He received a notification on his phone. His friend was saying that he had talked to Yongjin's girlfriend, and they started to make fun of Yongjin. Yongjin got angry but then started to head home. However, behind him, a shadow appeared, then a mysterious silhouette, and then a hand reached out and a ball hit him. He looked back and exclaimed, "You damn dash, it was a little boy." Jin asked if he had thrown that. The boy said, "Be careful." Jin didn't understand and said, "No, I'm the one who needs to be careful." Another little brat appeared, saying that was dangerous, and the first brat told him not to be mad. The kids were worried about him. They then came closer and said, "Be careful next time, big brother Jin." A little confused and irritated, Jin thought, "Cursed children." Before leaving, one young boy stared at the other boy. "Hey bro, these guys look alike, huh?" "Bro, they have the same dead eyes." The little boy turned around without saying anything. Jin thought to himself, "What the hell was that?" Back with Raizu, she wondered if Jin was once her. She then looked at her phone. Behind her, a mysterious person appeared. "Boy, those feet are so ugly, huh bro?" And all that was left on the floor were lemon drops. Back home, the ancestor was taking a nap. He then woke up and spoke, "You're back," and then realized something, asking, "Are you alone?" Jin replied that she would arrive soon. 15 minutes passed. Jin was trying to call Raizu, but she wasn't answering her phone. He then asked the ancestor, what happened next. He left the house and quickly looked around. Raizu was there, so he ran towards her, calling her name. She said, "Jin, where have you been?" He replied, "Oh, sorry, I thought it would be boring to find Lin." She asked, "Lin? Who is he?" He then said, "That friend of mine with glasses." She answered, "The boy Malu." Jin corrected her, Niga, and said that he was not Malu, but he would provoke him. Jin then realized something, Raizu was acting strange. He started to stare at her, stepping back, and said, "Hey, who are you?" Her face began to break apart, and an old man emerged from her. The old man said, "Grandpa Mang Tai." Jin was perplexed by this scene. The ancestor was running, calling for Jin, but when he arrived, there was nothing there.